Last night, I saw someone standing outside my bedroom window. The problem is, I live on the 5th floor. There's no balcony, no fire escape, nothing anyone could stand on. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from the streetlight. But then the shadow moved. Slowly, like someone leaning closer to the glass, trying to look inside my room. I didn't move at first. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the curtain. The shadow was still there, perfectly still, tall, thin, standing exactly where someone's head and shoulders would be. For a moment, I tried to convince myself it was just the streetlight, maybe a tree branch moving in the wind. But there are no trees outside my building, just an empty parking lot. And the shadow wasn't moving like branches. It looked like someone standing completely still, watching the room, watching me. My heart started beating so loud, I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. I slowly reached over to my nightstand and grabbed my phone. The screen lit up the room for a second, and when it did, the shadow moved. Not away, closer. Like whoever was outside had leaned toward the glass. I froze for a few seconds, just staring at the curtain, trying to decide if I was actually seeing what I thought I was seeing. Then I slowly sat up in bed. The shadow didn't move this time. It stayed there, right behind the curtain. Like whoever was outside knew I was watching. The room was completely silent. No wind. No cars outside. Nothing. I stood up and walked toward the window. Every step felt louder than it should have. When I reached the curtain, I hesitated. For a second, I considered just leaving it closed, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But that shadow was still there, right in front of me. So I grabbed the curtain and pulled it open. The shadow vanished instantly. There was no one there, just the empty parking lot 5 floors below. I stood there for a moment, staring out the window. The parking lot below was empty, just a few parked cars and the dim orange streetlight. No one looking up, no one standing anywhere near the building. For a few seconds, I felt stupid. Like I had just scared myself over nothing. But then something caught my attention. Right in the middle of the window, at about the height where someone's face would be if they were standing outside, there was a mark on the glass. At first, I thought it was just a smudge. Maybe something that had been there for a while. But when I leaned closer, I saw what it really was. Fingerprints. Several of them. Pressed against the outside of this window. My first thought was the window cleaners. Maybe someone had leaned against the glass earlier that week. But the building hadn't had window cleaning in months. And even if someone had been outside, they would need a lift or scaffolding. There was nothing like that in the parking lot. I looked down again. Nothing. Just the empty pavement 5 floors below. The fingerprints looked fresh, like someone had just pressed their hand there minutes ago. Without thinking, I touched the glass from the inside. My hand lined up perfectly with one of the prints. Same size, same shape. For a second, I imagined someone standing right where I was, but on the other side of the window, pressing their hand against the glass, mirroring mine. I quickly pulled my hand away and closed the curtain. I barely slept after that. Every small sound in the apartment made me open my eyes again. The refrigerator, the pipes in the walls, cars passing outside. But nothing else happened that night. The next day, I tried to forget about it. I even told myself the fingerprints had probably been there for weeks, that I had just never noticed them before. But that night, at almost the exact same time, I woke up again. The room was dark, the curtain was closed, and something was different. The curtain was moving, very slightly, like someone had just brushed against it from the outside. I didn't move. Not this time. I just watched the curtain, waiting. The movement stopped. Then, slowly, the same shadow appeared again, behind the curtain. Tall, still, standing exactly where it had been the night before. The outline of a head, shoulders, arms at the sides. And this time, it stayed there much longer. I stayed completely still. The shadow didn't move. It just stood there behind the curtain. Minutes passed. At least it felt like minutes. My eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. And the longer I stared at the curtain, the more something about the shadow felt wrong. It wasn't shifting, not even slightly. A real person standing outside would move a little, breathe, adjust their weight. But this shape was perfectly still, like something pressed flat against the glass, watching. Slowly, without taking my eyes off the curtain, I reached for my phone again. If something was really outside the window, I wanted proof. My hands were shaking as I opened the camera. The room filled with the faint glow of the screen. For a moment, the shadow didn't react. Then, something strange happened. The shadow leaned forward. Just slightly, like it had noticed the light from my phone. My heart started racing. Slowly, I stood up again, one step toward the window, then another. The shadow stayed where it was, but now it looked closer to the curtain, closer to the glass. I reached out and grabbed the edge of the curtain. For a moment, I hesitated again. Then I pulled it open. The shadow disappeared instantly, just like the night before. The window showed nothing but darkness outside. But this time, something was different. The fingerprints were still there. More of them now. Spread across the glass, like someone had slowly moved their hands across the window, feeling along the surface, looking for something, looking inside. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I watched the video on my phone. At first, the recording showed exactly what I remembered. The curtain, the shadow behind it, completely still. Then the moment I reached for the curtain. But right before I pulled it open, something else happened. Something I hadn't noticed in the dark. The shadow didn't move away from the window. It moved closer. So close that the shape filled the entire curtain. And when I finally pulled the curtain open, the shadow didn't disappear. It was already gone. Several seconds before I opened it, I told myself it was over, that whatever I saw outside the window was just my imagination. That night, I closed the curtain earlier than usual, locked the window, turned off the lights, and tried not to think about it. For a few hours, the apartment stayed quiet. Nothing moved, nothing creaked, nothing touched the glass. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I remember was waking up suddenly in the dark. The room was silent, but something felt wrong. The curtain was open, slowly moving in the night air. I knew I had closed it. carefully, all the way. But now the window was fully visible. The streetlight outside was shining into the room, casting a pale orange glow across the floor and across the wall. I sat up in bed, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. That's when I noticed something standing between me and the window. A shape, tall, perfectly still, blocking part of the light. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Because the shape wasn't outside the window anymore. It wasn't behind the glass. It wasn't on the other side of the curtain. It was inside the room, standing a few feet from my bed, right where the light from the window touched the floor. And slowly, very slowly, one hand lifted and pressed against the glass from the inside, exactly where the fingerprints had been the night before.